Greetings. Welcome to ITR Live. I'm your host, Chris Hagenow, joined here with John Hendrickson, and we are live here from the Hendrickson Library at the Center for the Preservation of Western Civilization, housed at ITR World Headquarters. We are very glad you're with us. John, how are you doing today?
I'm doing fine, thank you.
Good. I kind of put you on the spot today. We had no pre-production meeting. I come flying in hot saying, John, we're recording in 5 minutes, head to the studio. And so John obviously has copious notes ready to go. So he's just always on call, ready for a podcast. So here we are today. We're still picking up the pieces from the election, and I think that's going to cover a lot of what we talk about today. I want to talk about leadership elections in the Iowa House and Iowa Senate, and then a little bit of what the President-elect Trump, however we're going to refer to him here, is putting his cabinet together, and some of what these leaders are saying about tax policy going forward. So we do have a fair amount to cover, and like I said, I came flying in. You're going to have to carry us today, John.
Okay.
So you ready?
Well, I hope so.
I hope so, too. Otherwise, it's going to be a real short episode. Yeah. All right. So, John, you and I were actually talking about this yesterday with leadership elections and what that means in the House and the Senate. And I thought I would take a moment to sort of maybe set the stage. Maybe not everyone knows how that works. But what typically happens is at the beginning of every 2-year General Assembly, each of the 4 caucuses, House Republicans, House Democrats, Senate Republicans, Senate Democrats, will come together for their plan. They'll have usually 2 caucus meetings before the session starts. One shortly after the election, where they elect their leaders and maybe do a recap what happened in the election, and then another bigger planning caucus in December to figure out what their policy priorities are. I think they largely know, but go over that. Spend a little more time in depth. So what we had, a couple of them, I think House Democrats met late last week and reelected Jennifer Conforce as the minority leader. I don't believe that Senate Democrats have met yet. But yesterday was both House Republicans and House Democrats, and they reelected their leaders. Ordinarily, that's not surprising at all. I think it is interesting just how long these leaders have been in place. And that speaks a lot to not only their standing in their respective caucuses, but that they've continued to get wins for their caucuses.
Absolutely.
And so you saw in the House, Speaker Grassley, Majority Leader Winschittle, elected to those positions again. They'll be going into they've already been in those spots for 6 years now, I think is right, or they'll be going into their 6th year. That's a long time for a legislative leader. I think can't remember a time that a speaker was in place that long. You probably have to go back at least to the 80s. So then on the Senate side, you had Majority Leader Whitver and Senate President Amy Sinclair. And President Sinclair has only been, she'll be going into her 3rd year, but this is the 8th year for Leader Whitver to be in that spot. So we were kind of watching that yesterday afternoon because I felt pretty good that I was looking, but wanted to make sure that those folks came back. Obviously, no surprises there. And I'm going on a long monologue, John, and I apologize, but I kind of wanted to get through this. And maybe it's not dissimilar the way it happens in Washington, D.C., but these are closed door meetings, and the folks campaign and run for these spots. They're not seniority based. They're not because somebody else pulled a string, or it is right after the election. A member will get on the phone and start calling through the caucus and say, "Hey, I'm running for majority leader. I'm running for speaker. I'm running for whatever," and so it's you've got to go at listen to the questions and face the music. So I think what's notable here, and I guess I'm getting to the point, is I was heartened, encouraged that Jack Whitver was reelected as leader to Senate Republican caucus. And I think you feel the same way. We were following
I do, yes,
that.
yeah.
And as the press release said, and I'm just going to read it rather than give my own comments on it. In May, Senator Whitver was diagnosed with a brain tumor. He underwent radiation treatment and began drug therapy treatment since his diagnosis. He is responding well to the treatments and continues to see forward progress. Multiple recent scans this fall have shown a steady and continued reduction in the size of the tumor. Many of his symptoms have improved, and optimism abounds about his recovery. Given some of what we heard back in May and June, it is already miraculous that Leader Whitver is coming back, not only just to his leadership spot, but to the state senate at all, and long may it continue.
Yes, yeah.
Okay, that was a lengthy monologue to start the show with, but I mean, what do you think about this big picture now that we know who the leaders are and they're the same?
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on the coming General Assembly?
Well, I think it's very good, and in fact, one, I was very excited to hear about Leader Whitver, not just being elected majority leader again, but just the great news on his health progress. I mean, that's answered prayer. Yeah. But I just want to, and this was in the press release, if I could just read,
please, because if you don't get to it, I'm going
to. And this was just another part of that statement. And here's what Leader Whitver said, and I'm quoting. This is from the Gazette, but it's an honor to continue to lead the most productive conservative Republican caucus in the country. And that part of it struck out, struck out in terms of the statement that he gave in terms of his election, because a number of people have. In fact, this morning I got an email from someone from Wisconsin asking for an update on Leader Whitver. And so people are watching what's happening in Iowa, and he's been a key part in all these wonderful reforms that have happened in our state, whether it's, the flat tax and, a whole host of number of things that have happened. He's been a key part of it. And I've argued, that he's been a strong part of Iowa's conservative coalition, and so I think he's right. I mean, this caucus is probably one of the most conservative in the nation, and so going forward, I think we in this election demonstrated that Iowans agree. As you mentioned the last time when we were going over the results, Iowans agreed. They strengthened the majorities in both chambers, and I think that's clear.
Yeah, I think the folks that listen to the program here know that Senator Whitver is a very good friend of mine, and we always have and continue to talk regularly, and talk about political issues, talk about everything else, talk about his fight that he's in right now. And so it's easy for me to say this is great, that he's leading one of the most productive conservative Republican caucuses in the country, and I believe that. But you spend time looking at what's going on around the country. Mm-hmm. I don't even think it's close that what Senate Republicans have gotten done through the leadership of, and I will give credit to that full caucus. They've got tremendous leaders in the rank and file in that caucus and in the House. I don't want to exclude them because they have played a part in this all the way along. But Senator Whitver has led and helped get the big wins done, and the significance of those wins and the volume of them cannot be matched by any other legislature in the country. And am I biased, or is that actually
no? And that's in fact that's what I heard this morning. From a person from Wisconsin just reaching out and saying, just asking for an update. And and that, I think that's one frustration I have, because we often joke Iowa being a flyover state, but we often get overlooked. And because we look at, Ron DeSantis, and, gets a lot of attention for his conservative, and Florida for their conservative policies. But, I think Iowa's just as good or even better than Florida. But Iowa gets passed up a lot. And look at Governor Reynolds. I mean, she's got another email I got this morning from another person, another state, just saying, just saying, hey, just saw that your governor just got the top honors from the Tax Foundation this year. That's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
And so Governor Reynolds has gotten quite a few honors this year, and that's because Iowa's been leading in so many policy fronts.
Yeah. That is, all of that is true. I want to, so looking forward a little bit, obviously with the stage is set, and we're going to talk about property taxes specifically in a little bit, because that appears to be one of the big issues. But one thing that I get asked a lot about is, well, what do you think just in general is next? So I mean, maybe ask the question of myself. Because they have done so many big things for these past, let's call it 8 years since we won the trifecta, I think folks' expectations don't need to be, I'm not saying they need to be lessened, but what these conservative wins look like probably changes a little bit. There's not going to necessarily be the huge income tax bill. We may continue to cut that at some point, but it's not that huge tax bill. It's not a reforming collective bargaining. It's not a major election law piece like voter ID. Those we've done so many of those big things that I don't know that there is we did school choice being the other most recent one. I don't know that there's a huge major because we did them all.
Yes, yeah.
And so it shifts from, we spent the last 8 years setting the foundation for conservative governance. And now it is moving the next step to the other policy that springs forth off of that.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to find a way to define that, but I think people's expectations, like I said, it's not less, it's different.
Yeah. In some ways, it's going to be even more difficult because it's going to be very hard, because one hard thing is going to be restraining spending is going to be a challenge.
Absolutely.
A big thing that we're going to be talking about a lot over the next months into the new year is property tax reform. It's not going to be an easy thing, as we'll talk about even later on here. Multiple states are struggling to find a solution to this. I think Iowa could be an outlier and setting the stage for this, just like we did in the flat tax. I think the next set of reforms for Iowa is going to be, now that we've done these big things in tax, the flat tax is, one, not being complacent, so I think continuing to look for ways to lower the rate, but also continuing with what the governor has done in terms of reforms, in terms of looking for ways to continue to streamline government through maybe reforms and cutting bureaucracy, doing further regulatory reforms, things like that. Two big things that I know that you and I are both passionate about, I think will be important, is the 2/3 majority amendment and the flat tax amendment. Those will be important things focusing for this coming session, but also just continuing looking at some of those fiscal conservative budget reforms that the governor has started. They're not exciting, but they're important.
Yeah. No, I agree with all of that. And so we're going to be looking how to determine what the ongoing wins look like. We're going to figure out how do we continue that momentum for conservative reforms. And there's going to be a lot to do.
Yeah.
Good. So we'll probably continue. I want to make a comment. I didn't necessarily tell you this at the outset, but I have gotten questions over the last few days over recounts in Iowa. You have the first district congressional race between Christina Bohannon and Marionette Miller Meeks. You also have a couple of legislative races here. You had the Senate race out here in Dallas County between Senator Sarah Trone Garriott and Mark Hansen, which I think was at 19 votes on election night. And then you also had Senator Nate Bolton against Mike Pike over east side of Des Moines and Altoona. Those, I think, are both going to recounts.
Is there one legislative house race in Ankeny that's in recount too?
That's right. Yeah. There is, I think, on that one as well.
And I can't remember who the candidates
none of
were,
them were single digits.
Yeah.
Which we saw famously in the first Marionette Miller Meeks election. The thing I can tell you is that Iowa elections are done very well. And the optical scanner machines that you feed your ballot in, we've talked about this, are incredibly reliable. You can put millions of ballots through these things and you might miss one or two. So it is very rare that a recount in Iowa changes an election by more than a vote or two one way or the other. I went through one in 2012, and they fed the ballots through the machines a time and a half, and not a single ballot changed. I did end up picking up one vote in the recount, and it was because, as I understand it, I mean, I wasn't in the room, that there was an absentee ballot that had been folded, and then as it ran through the mail sorter at the post office, that the one edge of the envelope got kind of chewed up. Oh. And so what they do, I don't know if I ever told you this story, John. So what they do is the election office brings it in and they open up the damaged ballot, and then in order to run it through the machine, they copy the ovals over, and they keep the spoiled ballot and set that to the side.
Yeah.
Well, my line item on that ballot was where that fold had happened, and so that had been damaged, and so the recount board looked at it and saw, yeah, actually there was a vote there for Chris Hagenow, but it didn't get transferred onto the new ballot that ran through the machine, and that was part of the recount process.
Yeah.
But my point is, after 2 to 3 days of recounting and ballots and examination, only one vote changed. And I say all that for those folks that are wondering about recounts, is that they really don't change the outcome much. If it's one or two, you might get there, but it's so I expect the folks that were ahead, at the end of the night on election night, will ultimately be the ones that win those elections. So good. We'll talk about that. You and I have been talking a lot lately about. I just want to touch on this because we find it interesting.
Yes, yeah.
But it seems that most of the national coverage is consumed with who's going to be in President Trump's cabinet. You had any thoughts on that one?
Yeah, it's been very, very interesting, very exciting. It's and the names are coming out very quickly.
Yeah, they are.
It seems on every day there's been high profile people coming out. So it's been very quick.
Yeah. It's the one thing that is pretty clear through all of this is that President Trump is picking people that he knows will be loyal.
Yes. Yeah.
And that was one of the and I think even others in the party might say that comes at the cost of some experience. But I guess in defense of President Trump, I mean, the one that I've gotten people texting me is his pick for Secretary of Defense.
Yes, yeah.
Which was not the one that you thought he might or wanted him to take.
No.
It doesn't have that kind of experience.
Yeah.
Is it Pete Hegseth, I think?
Yes, yeah. Which I never even thought of. That was. But
what prevented President Trump, in large part, of getting everything done he wanted in that first term is that you had people with their own agenda and that wanted to keep doing things the way they had always been done. And it seems to me that a large part of what gave rise to President Trump in the first place, certainly that the American people gave him, a majority of Americans wanted him in office, is to shake up the way things have been happening.
Yeah.
It goes back to drain the swamp. You can't drain the swamp if you just fill your cabinet with swamp creatures.
Yeah.
So I think that's encouraging broadly. I don't love every pick. Doesn't matter. I'm not the one that just got elected president.
Yeah.
But
I was hoping that Colonel Doug McGregor would have been chosen, but maybe he'll still find a role in the administration. And
the other thing we learned from the first Trump presidency is he's not afraid to make changes.
Yes, yeah.
So that's always out there as well. Okay, picks are still coming in. I've been largely encouraged by the direction that's all going.
Yeah.
Okay. I want to circle back a little bit to property taxes, the agenda going forward in Iowa. There's a couple of pretty good articles, one in the Wall Street Journal and another Radio Iowa talking about Governor Reynolds on property taxes. You're the one that's supposed to be carrying this, and I'm doing all the talking. What have we learned?
Yes, well, Governor Reynolds, Radio Iowa did this, and what was it? For a few days ago, this came in. I can't remember. But,
it was Kay Henderson with collecting some different comments.
Yeah, she had spoke. The governor spoke to the West Side Conservative Breakfast Club, and this is where this story originated. But basically, the governor talked about not just her record, but also priorities for the upcoming session, and she mentioned that property tax is going to be one of them. She didn't really outline details yet of any specific plans, but it was encouraging for us to hear that, that's going to be a priority. Mm-hmm. And, of course, the governor has said that, and other legislative leaders have said that property tax will be a priority. But what's interesting, though, is that this election, several states had ballot measures of various degrees, and we don't necessarily have time to go into details on those on property taxes. And what we're seeing across the nation is that states are basically struggling with how do you address high property taxes. And so, for example, I think probably the most famous one was in North Dakota, which had a measure that which failed, which kind of surprised me. But if it passed, it would have eliminated property taxes altogether, and that failed. But I
have a take on that.
Yeah,
it doesn't surprise me. As frustrated as Americans are across the board, they're not. They understand. Mm-hmm. There's things and we understand. There's things you have to do.
Yes, yeah.
And there are services that are absolutely critical to society that are funded on the backs of property taxpayers. Mm-hmm. And we acknowledge that as well. Yeah. And just out and out eliminating them, well, you got to have more of a plan than that.
Yeah.
I mean, if you eliminate property taxes in Iowa, okay, well, what's your plan to keep schools open?
That's right. Yeah.
So it doesn't really surprise me, but it does show the fact that a proposal like that got traction. Mm-hmm. Still shows the voter frustration.
Yeah.
I had to jump in on that.
But no. One I will say one theme from looking at all these measures where I think this is where Iowa could be unique, and is everyone else is focusing on assessments, it seems like. And I think, not to be arrogant, but I think we have it right. Mm-hmm. And we're focusing on the source of the problem is on the spending side.
Yeah.
And I think we're right on this. And while all these other states are focusing on high assessments, and it's easy to put the blame on there, I think by focusing our solution on the spending side, that's where you're going to find the better solution. And so I'm hoping as our session kicks off in January, that as the legislature starts looking at bills, that we can find a solution that focuses on spending. But that's one theme I kind of saw through this, and the Wall Street Journal kind of focused on that.
I think one of I don't know if it's necessarily unique, but in Iowa we have rollback, mm-hmm. which protects the taxpayer from the big assessment increase. So if your assessment goes up 20%, that's going to be rolled back so that you're shielded from a lot of that big increase. Now your local government may decide to continue to raise your taxes, but they have to make that decision. And that's not the case in every state where they can't. When that assessment hits, you're getting stuck with it. And the assessment process, could it maybe be improved? Sure. But we have rollback in Iowa. And I think what it does, because we have rollback, because we have that tax protection, I think it highlights why limiting spending is so important.
Yes, yeah.
Because there is no other solution. We've got the taxpayer protection with rollback to protect us from the assessment increase. But that doesn't slow down the spending. You need the caps on the spending, which is why ITR Foundation and ITR have promoted this idea of a 2% hard cap. And I think that's being generous. Mm-hmm. Spending has grown so much that it's just time to stop. we've got to press the brakes on spending.
Yeah.
So I
like that. You just summarized why we need that solution. I think that was
it's kind of my job, John.
That was good.
Well, good. All right, we figured something out today.
Yeah. The other thing I want to mention quickly, if we have time, is just the other thing I think was overlooked in this election is that there was a lot of retaliation against the left wing at the state level. And so, for example, our neighbors in Minnesota, the DFL, and Governor Tim Walz, the left is in retreat. Yeah. There is a now for the first time, and I think I forget how many years, there's a tie in their House, 67, 67.
I didn't see that.
Yeah, and I believe the DFL still has a majority in the Senate, but they lost 3 seats in the State House, and they lost one House seat that they held for 96 years. And in Michigan, they had a trifecta, and the Republicans broke that. They flipped the State House. They picked up seats in the State Senate. Even in Vermont, Republicans picked up 17 seats. The Republican governor there, Phil Scott, openly campaigned because the Democrats had overrode a series of vetoes to increase property taxes, and so voters responded against against the progressive agenda across the nation.
Well, we can confidently say that voters want relief on property taxes. We know it from the polling in Iowa. We know it from election results in Iowa. We know it was litigated in different elections across the state of Iowa, and we've seen it across the country through ballot initiatives and other elections. So we know where folks are at on property tax. They want real results. But I think maybe branching out from that a little bit is something I've been thinking about. Anytime you lose an election, the losing side has to do some soul searching. Mm-hmm. And right now it is the liberals and the Democrats that are doing that. And it's kind of fun to watch, for starters. But on more of the social issues, you're seeing a real divide. Do they want to continue to pursue that left-wing social agenda? And a big chunk of that movement has become so radicalized on the issue that they're not backing down. But you see others. I saw a couple of bits from James Carville that was saying like, "What in the world are we doing? We're losing elections because we've gone so far to the left."
Yes, yeah.
But I don't. I guess in my mind, I'm not sure that they can change course on that. I think they can maybe learn some lessons on some fiscal issues, which I'm here for all of that. I mean, it's our bread and butter. But on some of these social issues, I don't know. I mean, you see these stories of folks that are, canceling holiday plans with family and going like, I can't deal with them because, my aunt and uncle are Trump voters.
Yeah,
it's really tearing at. It's tearing at kind of that fabric, and we've talked about that in the past, John, too. Is that as a country, we have always had things, those ties that bind us, and that we would move past elections.
Yeah,
it seems like that is becoming increasingly elusive.
Yes, yeah.
And I know the left would probably try to say that look how crazy Republicans have come, but I'm not really sure that the policies. And you're a better judge of this than I am. I'm not sure that the policies that have been set are any different than what have kind of guided center-right elected officials for a very long time in this country.
No.
I mean, you're talking about, tax cuts. I don't know, fiscal discipline. We could probably put an asterisk by that because we'll cover that on another day.
Yeah.
But, it is historical societal norms. It is, conservative governance. And even if you put in some of the, the trade policies and like none of those are out of the mainstream.
No.
But it seems like it is the left that is wanting to really deviate from that which has been historically part of what we've done. So I don't know. It's concerning if you want a healthy democracy. And I don't think the answer, as I've been asked several times, is to see everybody on the winning side extend an olive branch to the left. They're welcome to come along if they want. It seems to me that the party that needs to take a step forward or take a step back, as the case may be, is the losing side. They're the ones that need the introspection.
Yes.
I don't know why the party that just won a big national election is the one that has to change course to try and meet the middle.
Yeah.
Because that's not how this works.
No.
I think the losing party needs to figure out how they can get closer to where the majority of Americans are at.
Yeah, absolutely.
And don't sell voters short. They may not always have every bit of information on these issues as we do, John, or as the powers that be in D.C. or at the state capitol, but they get it.
Yeah.
Their priorities are important. And if they say, look, I don't care about, whatever Kamala Harris has to say on trans issues, I'm mad at inflation. Like, listen to voters because they actually know what they're talking about. Yeah. And you call half of them bigots and hate-filled and fascists. You're not getting there.
Yeah. There was some, I forget, one elite reporter that was said something after the election that he couldn't believe how much the price of butter was. And then I thought, and you're surprised at the election result? And if you're just now discovering that how expensive butter is and you're wondering why?
Yeah. I think it was Joe Scarborough.
Oh, is that?
Yeah, and I'm sure that
it's just ridiculous.
Joe Scarborough isn't shopping at the, Windsor Heights Walmart.
Yeah.
I doubt he's got his finger on the pulse of consumer prices here in Middle America.
It's like Mitt Romney buying his clothes at Costco.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that's okay. Yeah, but the point stands is that they've lost touch.
Yeah. One other interesting thing, and I'll be quiet after this, but one other development I thought was really interesting this last time was another state and local development nationally was ranked choice voting is going down in flames.
Great.
Even in blue states, Oregon, Colorado, and then a few red states, Idaho, Arizona, Nevada, all shot down ranked choice voting. And I believe in Alaska repealed it.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
Well, what is, briefly, what is ranked choice voting and why is it bad?
Well, it's a very complicated system. So when you go to vote, you basically rank your preference. And then basically when it's tabulated, you keep on, it keeps on readjusting. Yeah. And so it's very complicated. And it's just proven to be a very disastrous system. Yeah. And I've just oversimplified it, but it's a very
it's anti-democratic.
Yes,
kind of the idea of one person, one vote, and you pick the winner. So I think it's great. I think it's dangerous, and it's glad to see people kind of waking up and going the other direction.
Yeah.
Well, good. I think we've covered a lot of ground. We got way more in here than I thought we would today, John. So I think we're going to go ahead and wrap things up. We're going to continue to talk about what we have learned from the election. We're going to talk about what we think lies ahead and how to continue to make the state of Iowa the best place it can be, because we have got a great start. And so with that, John, thank you. Thanks, listeners. Don't forget to share. We've gotten a lot of feedback lately, John, on the past few episodes, both before and after the election, and share that. I mean, we obviously want the stats to look good, but share the podcast, whether you're on YouTube or listening to the audio podcast. But we'd love it if you could share that with your friends and people that you know that would enjoy the content. So, and also don't forget to like and subscribe. And with all of that, we will see you next time on ITR Live.